Everyone, I'm calling to order the Board of Supervisors regular meeting for November 1st. If everyone would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence. Thank you. Moving into the agenda, we do have one item that we can pull. The closed session can be pulled from the agenda. We would all be in agreement on that.
And just note that I did add Agenda H4 regarding the FY23 budget schedule discussion. Not anticipating any action, but I wanted to get it in front of the board and the public this month so you could think about it over the next month.
That sounds good. And can we still pull item G2, the courthouse historic window restoration purchasing award?
You can. You can also, I can give an update during that time, or you can pull it.
Just a minute to discussion.
Okay, I'll leave it on there then. So with the items that we've discussed, not including G2, I would make a motion that we amend the agenda and adopt it as amended.
I will second Ms. Smith's motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Move into presentations. Dr. Grimsley, school report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Clearly.
Happy November from your friends at RCPS. October was such a wonderful month at the schools. For the first time in almost 2 years, the events of the month almost seemed normal, with our spirit weeks at both schools, fun-filled outdoor pep rallies, the trick-or-treat parade, powder puff football, homecoming, pride clubs. These events provided much-needed social-emotional support in parallel with our academics that have been unfortunately derailed for quite some time due to the pandemic. We are happy to see the latest report from VDH stating that Rappahannock County has reached the low community transmission rating, at least for last week. This has also been reflected in our school dashboard as well, with only 3 current active cases reported as of Friday, and the high school holding steady at 0 for 2 weeks in a row. This month was truly very busy at RCPS. The major theme was Bullying Prevention Month, with many of the activities designed to help students be good friends, neighbors, and citizens by supporting one another, embracing each other's differences, and knowing when to seek help for a friend. Students participated in a Stamp Out Bullying Spirit Week and created fun posters to illustrate ways to prevent bullying at the school. The Pride clubs at both schools met as well to experience team building and participate in fun activities such as cooking, airplane design, painting, dance, kickball, Minecraft, skating, yoga, French, and more. Pride is a grant-funded program that stands for Positive Relationships Inspire a Drive for Excellence. The program instills a sense of belonging and positive school culture for students and staff alike and provides a peer-supported network through like-minded interests and aptitudes. Students find new friends and hobbies all the while having fun. Our Ag Academy has been extremely busy this month, offering students many hands-on, real-world opportunities to experience the various careers in the agriculture cluster. These activities included a real pet grooming service established by our vet science students to provide services such as bathing with blowout, nail trimming, mat removal, ear cleaning, shave downs, brush outs, specialty grooming, and even anal gland expression. Staff members can make appointments to bring their pets in for these services with a donation to the Ag Academy program. Students were also visited by a mobile dairy farm classroom with a full demonstration on milking a cow, describing the entire process from milk going from the cow to consumer. Students were able to assist and participate in this activity and even had the pleasure of watching their principal kiss the cow at the end. Finally, a demonstration by Heaven's Hollow Farm showed agri-science and vet science students how to process a chicken for consumption from start to finish. Students were given an overview of pastured poultry production, chick selection, infrastructure design, feeding, and marketing. The Ag Academy is fast becoming a pillar program at Rappahannock County Public Schools, where we utilize this amazing context of this community to teach students the essential skills necessary for careers in agriculture and beyond. The best part, though, is the renewed appreciation students gain for their neighbors who live and work in the county, as well as for professions in agriculture. As one student commented after the chicken processing lab, "I never truly thought farming was so much work until at school we were taught how to process a chicken. These farmers process several chickens a day to help feed people around them. This process is several hours long. I truly have full respect for my farmers after seeing this today. Thank you, farmers, for doing the absolute best to provide for people around you. It's such hard work." Congrats. So we love our Ag Academy. It's taking off. So thanks to the community, too, for really participating in all these activities. We have so many reaching out to say, "Hey, I have something going on in my farm, and hey, would you like to bring the kids here?" And it's like, yes, this is what it's all about. A couple of student accolades. Congratulations, senior Luke Ellis, who finished 4th at the 2021 Bull Run District Cross Country Championship at Newmarket Battlefield last week. Our boys and girls cross-country teams traveled to Fraser Farms in Alta Vista for the VHSL Regional Championships on Wednesday. Our girls varsity volleyball team will play in the VHSL Regional Quarterfinals at Riverheads this afternoon. Here's hoping for a strong march to championships for our girls. We hope you will come to the RAC Fall Art Tour next weekend, where some of our students' artwork will be on display in the main gallery at the Washington School. And as always, thank you so much for your continued support and advocacy for your local public school system. Do you have any questions for me?
Dr. Grimsley, thanks a lot for the presentation, and the Ag Academy sounds really dynamic. So anything we can do to continue to support that would be a great opportunity, and I'm glad you flagged it for us. I have a constituent, a property owner on Schoolhouse Road who has had difficulty getting to and from his property during the afternoon elementary school pickup. And so I wonder if you and I, or perhaps the principal or your transportation person, could work together to see if there isn't a way to somehow add maybe a loop behind the school, or somehow move the cars that are queuing on Schoolhouse Road away from the entrance to that property.
Yeah, and I can see probably in the afternoon there's about a time period of about 20 minutes or so where that can be a little problematic at the end of the day pickup. But those routes are always looked at by the Sheriff's Department, our principal, and transportation for the most efficient way to move those cars through. So, but we will look at it and see if there's any way to
Okay, yeah, and I'd be happy to come by during the affected time period and maybe just see what it looks like with someone from the school. So let's arrange that. And then I also just want to thank you. You always take my phone calls, and we had a good conversation earlier today about Congressman Good's visit to the school, and I appreciate all your everything you explained to me in that regard. So thanks for all you do.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Not having ever kissed a cow, I do have some fond memories of affectionate horses, so
Oh.
I just wonder how that kind of went down, but I won't ask you.
That's okay. I think it was some perusing from the students to the principal, who happily obliged the students. And he's very excited about our ag program and goes to all the FFA events and supports the kids. So we love to see
I
that.
think it's important. It's probably a very, very important part of the farm to table that never surfaced before.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast it's taking off. We started at the beginning of last year with 6 students interested in FFA. It's grown to over 60 within the year period in FFA.
That's awesome.
It's amazing. So the kids are thirsty for this, and they see the context, and the community's so supportive, and it's just a new breath of life in the high school around this program. So
It's
we're
good.
really excited.
Do you need dogs to experiment on for the trimming and all that?
You can make an appointment with our vet science class for real. So they have a great setup. You'll have to come see the classroom. It has the grooming sink and all the harnesses and the kennel cages and everything set up really nicely. So they've done a good job.
I think I mentioned to you I was able to attend the ladies volleyball, the high school girls, and they're just very impressive. I'm sorry they didn't make it past that night, but they really were an impressive team.
They are all the way through our middle school upwards. So we have a great system there. So hopefully it'll continue.
It was exciting. Yeah.
It is.
Thank you for all you do.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next we have a presentation by Mr. Hua, the President and CEO of Rappahannock Electric Cooperative. Thank you.
And you can adjust if the handle or.
Thank you. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Supervisors and Administrator. I'm John Hua, the CEO at Rappahannock Electric Cooperative, and it's really fantastic to be with you here this afternoon. Also with me here in the audience is Oliver Price. I think you all know Oliver extremely well, Director of Member Services and Community Relations, and Mark Paunton. Mark is Director heading up our broadband and fiber optic efforts, so really appreciate both of those individuals attending with me today. And I do have some slides. I don't know if those are, I guess those are up for your view there, and I'll go through this as timely as possible. Let me just first thank you all for your service to the region, to the county, to the communities that we serve. I know it's been a time of a lot of challenge, but also a time of a lot of opportunity. And hopefully you'll hear some of that with respect to the progress we're making at Rappahannock Electric as your service provider. Next slide, please, if you don't mind. I'm not sure exactly who's clicking. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. So just at a high level, just it's kind of interesting to back out just a little bit and think about the electric co-op network across America. There are approximately 900 electric cooperatives covering 56% landmass of the United States. And I think that's a pretty astonishing fact there. Co-ops provide service in some or portion of 88% of all U.S. counties and operate about 40% of all the distribution lines in the U.S. while only serving about 13% of the load. Next slide, if you don't mind. So Rappahannock today is, of course, we're serving in portions of 22 just wonderful, beautiful Virginia counties. We have about 170,000 services and growing, adding about between 3,000 to 3,500 net new accounts per year. We're powering up with a team of about 430 employees and actually beginning to just significantly reinvest more and more into the grid. Our capital investments have continued to grow with respect to grid infrastructure, aging infrastructure, and broadband and other things that we're working to provide or facilitate for the membership. Next slide. And so here in the county, we have just over 5,000 accounts that we serve, some certainly notable that you all would be well aware of course, and just around 800 miles of distribution infrastructure. So you can see that we have a fairly low line density. That's typical of electric co-ops, and on the whole, REC is about 10 accounts per mile with between 17 and 18,000 miles of total infrastructure that our team is maintaining. Next slide. Our team has done a phenomenal job, continues to do a phenomenal job, whether it be the pandemic or the ice storms that we've dealt with or the windstorm of a few years ago. I've been in the role as CEO for a year, just over a year here at Rappahannock, but I've been with the cooperative about 4 years, and I've been in the co-op network for many years at this point. So I was here when we had some of the wind and other events that came through, and was actually in this region with some of the line review during that time frame. But our team continues to do just an unbelievable job throughout the pandemic and through a lot of the challenges that our industry is facing. Next slide, please. And that extends, of course, into our contact center, our call center. One of our values includes a caring value. That has been very, very important for us in dealing with businesses and families that have struggled throughout the pandemic. And that is, I think, something that our membership is responding strongly to. Next slide, please. So today, in terms of just community support programs, I think you may be aware of some of these, but I'm thankful to say that our Power of Change is really kind of considered like a monthly Operation Roundup type program, but we have over 30,000 co-op members today that are voluntarily contributing to that program on a monthly or occasional basis, which is really helping us in terms of community grants and community support for local nonprofits. I can tell you this last round, we had over 100 applicants for our latest round of community grants. So we're really working to make sure that our members are aware of how those dollars are being used and how they can help grow our capabilities together. Next slide, please. Our board members, we have 9 board members elected by the membership. They each reside in different geographic regions of the cooperative, but it's important to note that they act on behalf of the cooperative at large or as a whole. And if you go to the next slide, please, just some of our quick local contacts that I'll put some of these individuals you may be familiar with, but I put them in the slide just so you have their contact information. But Mike Lindsay, his board region includes Rappahannock County. Whitney Watts is my assistant, and she's always available, as am I, to help with anything that might come up. Obviously, Sean and Mark is here today with us, heading up our broadband efforts. So if there's any conversations we need to have on broadband, he can support that. Sean McDonough heads up our Western region, which includes operating center out of Culpeper as well as up towards Front Royal. Oliver, you know well, and thank you, Oliver, for all you're doing to help us with community relations. Two other quick contacts, Casey Hollins. Her team leads up our community programs, including sponsorships. So if there's something that the county would like for us to be involved in, or if there are agencies that are needing support, most of that goes through Casey. And then Felicia Ainsa. Felicia is helping us with economic development for communities or counties that are interested in programs of that nature. Next slide, please. So as far as our work plan improvements, as I mentioned at the onset, we are investing about $70 million a year in the grid, which is significant, but that is what's required to keep up with over 17,000 miles of infrastructure, new substations, reconductoring, enlargement of the system. And one of the things that we do each and every year is we look at our most challenged or our worst performing electric circuits, and we prioritize those in the next fiscal year for investment. A couple of areas that we focused on more recently here in Rappahannock County include our Sperryville substation and also our Flint Hill delivery area. And then more recently, we've actually been thankful that First Energy was willing to make some investments in the line that comes over from Page over to Sperryville. They've made some investment on improving some of the structures along that route. So I know that we've had a couple of outages in the last week or so here with the wind and some of the other things that we had going on, but by and large, I just want you all to know we're investing heavily in the region and making sure that we're on top of reliability needs across the county. Next slide, please. In terms of responsiveness, again, we have crew members that live in the counties that we serve, as well as trucks available at our regional offices, which primarily would include responding out of our Culpeper region. But we also have team members that have those vehicles after hours to make sure that we're able to respond as quickly as possible. Next slide. In terms of economic outcomes, I would just say there's a lot of diversity across the service territory. We're seeing everything from growth in agritourism to certain commercial districts to some planned developments. This is something that we're having to flex to a lot of different needs because those needs vary substantially from county to county and from region to region. So our goal is to make sure that we can be responsive to whatever each county might need and what it might need in its future. Next slide, please. Of course, we serve a portion of the national park in partnership with the National Park Service. If you're thinking of how far our lines extend, think of Big Meadows Lodge. That's really the kind of the dividing line there between Rappahannock Electric and Shenandoah Valley Electric. Shenandoah serves Skyland, and we serve Big Meadows, coming from opposite directions. Next slide, please. So our COVID response and throughout the pandemic could not be more proud of our team members. We've actually had a lot underway. Obviously, we all had to, at some time or another, adapt in the way we conduct our operations, and our team has done that and has done that very well. We've been able to maintain the grid, maintain our member services. We've done some things a little differently, but we've still been able to keep on top of safety and reliability. A few things. We had a rate reduction actually in 2020 and a net bill reduction in 2021. So we've had 2 years of power costs coming down. That's been really good for our membership. The board voted to put $23 million of capital credits, that includes 2020 and 2021 combined, back into the pockets, if you will, of our members and their businesses. And with that, we've also were able to administer $4.8 million in CARES funding for accounts and members that were struggling with the pandemic. We just learned that we have been awarded, if you will, $6.6 million in the American Rescue Plan dollars, which will also go to help members that we have set up now on payment plans. A lot of those homes and businesses had gotten pretty far behind. We had as many as 17,000 that we had to work with on payment plans. And so these dollars will now be appropriated to help some of them begin to catch up, or most of them be able to catch up. Next slide, please. And I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but I want to kind of give you the full look at your co-op. Our primary power provider is Old Dominion Electric Co-op, headquartered in Richmond. We also receive a hydroelectric allocation from the Federal Hydropower Program. I would just say that our power supply is extremely diverse, pretty much every source that you could imagine, from traditional sources. We have a nuclear allocation as part of the North Anna facility. We have coal facilities. We have some of the cleanest natural gas facilities really in the nation. We have some solar power in the portfolio, some wind in that portfolio, and of course hydroelectric through the Federal Hydro Program. And next slide. And what I'll just say about that power supply is that balanced portfolio is really optimized for a number of different economic outcomes and allows us to be shielded from any type of inflation in gas or other expenses. Just a couple of really quick trends. Today we have about 2,000 members that own a rooftop or ground mount solar, and we are interconnecting those. When they need grid power, we provide it. When they have excess generation, we buy it back and deliver it to their neighbor. It works nicely, and it's completely aligned with our co-op model of individual members contributing to a greater system. Beyond that, I'll mention in terms of electric vehicles, we are preparing for I think a wave of electric vehicle adoption. This could be very good for rural drivers. Could also put some challenges and demands on the grid, but could be really good in terms of a cost saver for rural drivers across our service territory. And then additionally, energy storage and battery backup, or even diesel or propane type backups. We're looking at how to do more in those areas to make sure that we're providing some backup services to our membership when things do go wrong. Okay, next slide. In terms of the digital divide and broadband efforts, I'm happy to report that our fiber backbone, which is a $30 million project, 820 miles, Mark is overseeing the construction of that project and the contractors that are involved. That project in Rappahannock County is very close to being finished in this part of our service territory. We believe the total project, which traverses through almost every county we serve, will take a little bit more into 2023 timeframe, but we've accelerated that effort, and the construction of that system is going well. So we're getting close to that backbone being finished in the county, which means that providers or interested providers could certainly ride on or lease space from REC on that backbone. Beyond that, we're willing to work with any number of providers on everything from pole attachments to fiber, joint fiber, or fiber ownership, even in the case of some counties that we're working with. So REC is positioning itself as an enabler to help make whatever broadband interest might be available or might be in the county's plans. We're positioning ourselves as an enabler to help those internet service providers that hopefully will be stepping up and providing some end services to the community. Okay. And just the last couple of slides here. In terms of reminders, our outage text alerts, we do our best to keep the power on, but however, when we do have disruption, text alerts and are a good way to keep informed on what we're doing about getting that back on. We're also in the process of putting an updated outage map on our website. And I realize connectivity to a website in some parts of the county can be a challenge, but that is a big tool for us during major storms. So we're working to make that even more robust in terms of the message and the amount of information that's going to provide our consumers and our member owners who might be experiencing an outage. And then I think our last two slides here. So currently, your co-op, actually our numbers have actually improved on the latest waves, but as of last year's full study, REC came in 17th in the nation. That was amongst 145 utilities in J.D. Power's study. and we have an 84 American Customer Satisfaction Index. Actually, both of those numbers have improved. The most current wave, we were 14th on J.D. Power, and our ACSI has bumped up. So we're getting some good feedback from our membership. We know there's more we need to do. We know we can always be stronger and do it better, but we are getting some favorable feedback from the membership. And then the last slide, I would just say that, and I know that there's a lot happening in the workforce out there, but one of the things that is happening in our sector and to REC specifically is a wave of retirements. We have about 20% of our workforce that's in a 5-year window of retirements, and that started about a year and a half ago. So we are seeing a lot of retirements, individuals that built the grid, have helped the members, have built our systems. We're seeing them retire with 30, 35, in some cases 40 years of service. So as you know, individuals in the county or in the community that may be interested in a career, please send them our way. We would appreciate that. I know that it's a challenge for a lot of businesses these days, but please keep us in mind as you know, of individuals in the region. So with that, I know I've put a lot in front of you here. I really appreciate the time, and I'm glad to answer any questions you might have about REC.
There's a few.
Thanks a lot. Great presentation. It'd be great to hear from you once a year if that's possible.
Sure.
I learned a ton from your presentation today, and it just reminds me of how critical REC is just to the function of our community. First of all, I do want to give a shout out to Mr. Price. Christmas Eve day in 2019, I had a constituent who was on the losing end of a tree contractor project gone bad, and I know Oliver remembers that. And Christmas Eve day, folks were out there and fixed the problem, and that kind of service I just want to recognize because he really jumped into action. So thank you for that. You mentioned your reinvestment in the grid. Doing the math, just rough math based on your annual revenue, it sounds like you're reinvesting somewhere in the range of about 15% in the grid. How does that compare to other cooperatives and other electric utilities in terms of share of revenue reinvested?
Yeah, we're very close to, I would say, just right at or around industry averages, maybe slightly above with more recent years. And part of that has to be factored based on growth. And growth is a big part of that, and how much the co-op is contributing towards growth versus how much a new member might be contributing towards growth.
Okay, and then on your diversification of energy supply, just rough numbers, what percentage of your total supply would fall into sort of traditional power generation categories, and what would fall into wind, solar?
Sure. So we're about 13% renewables. So 85 to 87% would be traditional. But that is a very balanced slice for us, particularly because of our nuclear allocation, which is fairly unusual for electric co-ops.
Okay, great. And then you referred to a net bill reduction and a rate reduction. I just wonder if you could parse out what those terms mean.
Yeah. So the net bill reduction, and both of those were cost reductions to the membership.
Okay.
What we had in terms of our power supply cost at the beginning of the year, our members that are on a typical consumption, which is about 1,300 kilowatt hours a month, they would have seen about a $6 overall bill reduction. That was comprised of two pieces. What we needed to do, on the one hand, we had electric wholesale power costs coming down. On the other hand, we needed to have an increase in terms of our kind of our delivery revenue to support, again, the investment back into the grid. So those two netted out to where our membership saw, on the whole, a reduction. Mm-hmm. And then in 2020, we didn't have the two moving parts. We just simply had a power cost reduction for January 2020. So we're looking pretty good for 2020, 2022 right now. We're hopeful that we'll be kind of even. We may see a little bit of power supply cost relief, but we're still working with our wholesalers on that and looking at the market. One of the factors that is starting to influence that, you might be noticing that natural gas prices are inching up or moving up more than inching up. So delivered gas is an issue, and we're looking at that for how that could impact 2022.
Okay, last two questions.
Sure.
Thanks for your patience. So when a consumer has a consumer type solar array, how does that buyback into the grid occur? Is it an automated one, and do they know when that happens, or
Yeah.
only when they receive their bill?
Great question. It's seamless, and REC is in a very, REC's consumers that have solar or other small generation, but predominantly solar, are in a really favorable position. What we do, we provide a net metering relationship or net metering setup, and we'll help the member with reviewing their installation, making sure all the billing is correct. We even can provide them details in the billing system as to any buyback or anything else that we have. But what we do that's, I think, very beneficial is that while some utilities might do a monthly true-up or an annual true-up, we actually do an annual true-up, but we have been allowing those credits to roll. So what do I mean by that? If you do a monthly true-up, in April, you might have low consumption needs, but reasonable solar production, maybe May, like a mild May, where the days are a little longer. But if you get to a colder month, like let's say December, the days are short, you have lower production, but you might still have high consumption needs. We allow those credits to roll, and we've allowed those to roll. We actually have a yearly true-up. We've been allowing those members to roll those credits into the next year, which means that when they produce that energy, eventually, they're offsetting full retail versus a buyback. When we do get to the point of buyback, it's what's called an avoided cost. So it's more in tune with the cost of ODEX power to us, or our wholesale power cost. But when we allow those credits to roll over, they are offsetting more like 12 cents a kilowatt hour type full retail energy.
All right.
Hopefully that'll answer your
Yeah,
question.
super interesting. And then last question, in terms of recruiting for your aging workforce, to what extent are you encouraging or supporting policy for working from home? And I ask that as Rappahannock County, a somewhat isolated place, where if you don't allow working from home, where would Rappahannock County residents who wanted to work for you, where would they have to go to work?
Great questions. So we have really two different approaches on that. We do have I think, a very strong teleworking policy, and that's been a big part of our success during the pandemic as well. However, a lot of our crew members, the work is in the field, it is on the grid itself. So for our teams that are more of our call center, our finance teams, some of our engineering and design, although that's a hybrid, for team members that can be remote, we are significantly emphasizing remote work at this point in time, and we plan to do that even beyond the pandemic. For our field team members, we've had to be more thoughtful about the ways those crews kind of coordinate the work. At certain times during the pandemic, we were extremely dispersed. We are operating more now in a traditional crew structure, but they are operating in the field. One of the things that we've done, though, is that several of those team members do take the trucks home so that we can respond quickly. So to the extent of Rappahannock County and realizing there may be some broadband connectivity challenges, one, we're hopeful as we see ISPs and the possibility of funding and what the Commonwealth is doing in terms of kind of promoting broadband. We're hopeful for that, and we want to play a part in that to facilitate. But then secondly, for individuals that just are in a region where they're not going to have an adequate connection for work from home, we do have any number of jobs. Inventory, warehouses, our team members that are doing system inspection. We have any number of electric line workers. We have team members that keep and maintain and manage our fleet. We also do a lot of work with contractors in the area of vegetation and vegetation management. Again, being careful and thoughtful about how we do that. So there's a really wide range of roles that team members could take on.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
for all your
certainly.
answers.
Thank you.
So in terms of the right-of-ways for the coaxial to come through, has that all been cleared up?
So great question. So
I don't mean to interrupt, but I have a concern that we're discussing broadband, and this was not advertised as a broadband committee meeting. I was afraid someone would go here, and I really hate to interrupt, but when we were going through the slides and we got to broadband, and I'm glad you brought your broadband representative with you. I myself would love to talk about broadband, but this was not advertised as a broadband committee meeting. And so I don't want to run afoul of FOIA requirements if it's not something we should be discussing as a board.
I'm asking our council because that's a very good
Yeah.
point.
Yes.
Mr. Goff has suggested that we avoid the broadband-specific questions.
Thank you.
So my other question is, what are the chances that the Russians could hack into the grid and shut down the electric?
Well, that's a tough question. I will say that we take cybersecurity issues extremely serious, and our IT team is consistently looking at both our cyber culture and our cyber systems and our cyber defenses. In a worst case scenario, there are ways that we can operate the grid in a traditional sense. However, clearly our electric sector is increasingly dependent on new technologies. There's no doubt about that. And so we've been very careful at REC to adopt technologies, but to ensure that the traditional ways we run the grid are there and are capable in the event we needed to do that. But great question. Thank you.
Good to know. Thank you.
Mr. Frazier, I've got several questions. That's why I want to make sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's
Sure.
great that you can make it up here in person. And Mr. Ponton, we will have a Broadband Authority meeting on the 22nd of November. You're welcome to join us. One of the comments that was made by one of our citizens had me concerned because he's a farmer, and he said some of the lines on his property are so low that his large equipment cannot get under those. What do we do in that scenario?
We are glad to follow up and take a look at that. Our design is in compliance with the National Electric Safety Code, but I would like to make sure our team takes a look at it. What can happen sometimes, particularly on agricultural locations, is if an anchor, a guy wire or an anchor were to come loose, in some cases the pole can begin to lean, and then you start to see a degradation of the sag. So the other thing is that a lot of the farming equipment is bigger and bigger and bigger, and so we understand that. We are very glad to look at that, and we'll be glad to send someone out to follow up and take measurements and check the equipment that is being used, and if we need to, we can always look at taller poles and taller structures. Usually, it's a combination of taller structures and shorter spans that it takes to solve that.
So we would put that person in touch with.
Yes, actually, I think Oliver probably is taking notes right now, and I'm glad to follow up as well.
Good,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Bad weather, I own Griffin Tavern and have now for a little over 18 years. I can tell you the difference of downtime has changed tremendously in the positive for us.
Right.
And I really appreciate all the efforts because I think a lot of the line clearing that you do pre-bad weather has really made a difference. And just want to
Glad.
say thank you for that.
Thank you.
I also really appreciate the texts that tell us before I even call you that we know you're down. That's wonderful to have that, and the one that says we've got somebody coming out and then you're back
Right.
up.
Good.
I'm sure that saves your call center a ton of.
Yes, and that's where we're heading with the outage map. And I realize connectivity issues may be a challenge in other areas, but our goal with the outage map, the new outage map, is to go much more surgical in terms of telling the details of what might be happening at any one location. I think historically that's just been a challenge for utilities, and I've put the challenge in front of our team. How do we kind of break away and solve this in a way that a lot of utilities across the nation maybe haven't quite recognized yet, or maybe still at a grasp for them. So we want to take our new system. It's more flexible in the kind of the kind of notes and things that we can provide, and hopefully even provide in some cases if there's a hyperlink or a picture or something that someone needs to see what's going on out there. I think sometimes our membership just wants to know what happened and what are we doing about it, and I think we're doing really well with that. When there's a few outages, when we get into a really large scale outage, that's the part we want to make sure we're solving. Thank you.
Thank you. And the substation to substation project, I forget what that's called. You were going from Sperryville, I think, to Flint Hill and then over Chester Gap. Do you know where you are at this point?
Yeah, I'll have to talk with our team about these specifics of some of the timing. We've got a lot of different infrastructure projects, and one thing we would be glad to share with the county is kind of a countywide look at, we do have what I would call 34 kV system that goes station to station. And I know that we've got an emphasis on a kind of getting a redundant feed or a loop feed installed there, but I don't have the exact scheduling when that'll be finished up. But if the county would like to see a larger look at the projects within the county, we are glad to provide that.
That makes sense.
Okay.
That would be beneficial.
Yeah.
The electric cars and the load on you,
Yeah.
I assume there's some sort of strategic plan happening that shows as
Yeah.
cars go up.
Yes, great question. So at our annual meeting, I noted to our membership that kind of a national average for a rural driver is about 23,000. I think it's 23,900 miles. It's pretty significant. Our calculations, just taking like sedan to sedan, or maybe even light truck to light truck, like a smaller truck, our indications are that rural driver could save about $2,500 a year based on the current cost of electricity and the current cost of fuel, which has gone up a little bit since then. What we're doing a couple of things that are pretty fascinating, but also going to be a lot of work for us. One, we're looking at every distribution transformer, like at the street, if it's overhead or a pad mount, at a home or at a business. And we're looking at every distribution transformer, and we're taking our system, and we're taking our peak winter load and our peak summer load, and sometimes those are pretty close. And by the way, the transformers can handle less load in the summer because they're hot and more load in the winter when they're cold. But we're simulating or testing putting a level 2 EV charger on every single transformer or on every single account, and then put another one, and then put another, and then find the readiness, if you will, of any single account, any single site for its first charger, its second charger, or even a third charger. That project is underway right now, and our team's been working on that. Then we have to roll that up to like the substation to substation infrastructure, our express feeders, our distribution circuits, even the transmission grid, and then ultimately back to that power portfolio where I showed the slide, the balanced portfolio. So all that has to roll up. We're approaching it kind of in two directions. We're starting at the street and rolling up, and we're starting at the wholesale power and rolling down. And our intent is for those to meet in the middle. But we believe that the co-op for a household, just take a residential household that adds one EV to its vehicles, we believe we would sell 30 to 40% more electricity per year just because of that one purchase. They could have, two vehicles, two EVs at some point in time. We also think that there could be some, kind of neighborly trends. For instance, if someone buys one, let's say it's a new F-150 or a Silverado or something, and it's electric, and they're kind of talking about it, we see a situation where maybe the neighbor, starts to think about one. And so there could be some spots, in the territory where the adoption is kind of driven by just kind of local folks talking with each other and kind of talking it up, so to speak. So that's a big thing for us. And the other thing I would say is that REC is intending to be involved in providing the charging infrastructure itself. And the reason for that, there's a couple of reasons. One, for someone who might charge in their garage, then that involves, redoing the service entrance and could be pretty costly. But a lot of these vehicles aren't going to charge in the garage. If you look at a lot of people's garages, there's not room for an F-150 in there. So we can also provide a service straight off of the transformer, be it overhead or underground, but probably underground, and do it, I think, very kind of artfully, if you will, around the driveway area, and or provide something in the home that is much more involved. So hopefully that answers your question. Probably longer than answer than you wanted.
It's all coming, so it's
Yeah.
good information to have. If I wanted to put in a charging system at the tavern, there's all kinds of different companies doing charging systems, and people want the fastest charge they can get. How do you know how to order a hour charge versus a 4-hour charge?
Yeah, so that's part of our initial study. We are looking at kind of the system's aptitude right now. Where could we tolerate charging, in the first years, and where would it just kind of naturally fit? Beyond that, then we have to look at kind of the stacked issues. One of the things that we will be doing, and we have a rate in front of the Virginia Corporation Commission right now, an EV charging rate, but we'll be designing additional rates that make it really advantageous to charge at night and at off-peak times. But the challenge here is that certain events arise and everybody's going to charge. You know, if you just go to the grocery store right before a snowstorm, you know, everybody's there. And that's just the way it happens. And so there are times when we know that even if we send a really significant rate where a member can get a really low-cost charging at night, while that's incentivized, we still know that there are just peak times on the grid. And sometimes those peak times occur for extreme weather, and they occur when the grid is already peaking. So this is a real issue for us. It's also a real issue for the entire industry. And we're taking a very serious look. There's a lot of analysis going into this right now. And while 10 years, 5-10 years might seem like a long time in terms of when some of the fleets will be out, many of them are out today. And that's not a long time in terms of the kind of the infrastructure for the grid. That's a pretty quick time. The last thing I'll say is that today, if there were like a housing development somewhere in our service territory, we see it coming. It's through planning and zoning. It might take a year to get built. It might take a year or two for homes to go up. It's a long time frame. Today in our service territory, if a business decides that's running trucks or distribution center, if they decide to go with EVs or EV electric trucks, they could have those vehicles in a matter of a few months. But the demand on the grid might be as much or greater than like an apartment complex or even a large subdivision. So the speed at which it's going to hit is very, very important and something we have to be way ahead of.
I think the school buses transitioning is another.
Perfect example. Yeah.
Okay. And I promise my last question. Sure. I know in other counties you can see wreaths and USA flags and everything on your on poles. Yep. I've had a citizen ask me if we can't do that through the village of Flint Hill. And when I researched it before, it sounded like you all don't have a program to share your poles for that kind of thing.
So there's a couple of areas in the territory that we have agreements like that, and we're glad to talk with the county if the county wants to be the facilitator of those conversations. I would just say that in saying that, we have to make sure that it's done in a very safe manner, and that REC is kind of handling the upkeep, and we would ask the county to fund that because, again, we serve 22 counties and towns within those areas, and we don't kind of offer that as a donated service, but we could certainly offer that if you all wanted us to look at something in some contained areas of the region there.
Thank you very much.
Sure thing. Great. Thank you.
Pretty much everything that I had wanted to ask has been covered, so.
Fantastic.
Except Mr. Ponton can come back on the 22nd.
Sure thing. And if I may just say, the fiber system is also for the grid.
Right.
I won't go any further than that, but the 820-mile project is first and foremost for the grid itself. But I understand it's I want to respect.
We're redundant to the broadband board.
Yep, I
It's
understand.
the same people.
And I respect that. Thank you. Thank you.
I had one last question that occurred to me when you're talking about warehouse inventory specialists. To what extent have global supply chain constraints had an adverse effect on your ability, one, to deliver your fiber backbone, and then also just regular maintenance and upkeep of the grid?
It's one of the most serious problems we face right now. We have seen extraordinary inflation in the cost of metals, transformers. Conduit has been unbelievable. I mean, numbers that we've seen 200%, 300%, 400% on some of those, conduit being maybe the worst. So we've seen extraordinary. We've briefed our board of directors more than a few times on this, and our team has been working to place orders way further out than we ever have before. It's an issue. We are working with developers that have planned projects. We're working with them to make sure they understand some of the constraints that we could run into. We are also looking at our capital plan and coming up with looking at how that plan might need to temporarily be modified to preserve materials in the event of rationing and the types of things that we're starting to see in the industry with regard to like transformers and wire. So we are well stocked today, but we're also in a region where an ice storm can change that very abruptly, And so we're looking beyond the first event into a second event and so on. And what does that do for natural growth, our significant capital plan, and how do we maintain storm readiness past a first or second storm?
Great.
But it's a big issue for
Yeah, it
us.
seems it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Really enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, next on the agenda is public comment. Anyone in the courtroom that would like to come up and speak, please come on up, tell us your name and what district you're in.
Anita Ramos, Hampton District. I come to you with a very modest proposal. Meetings run longer and longer or tighter and tighter over time. And what I would suggest, we're looking forward to a new year. Perhaps you all might think about having your first Monday meeting starting at 1, cutting it at 5, and then coming back at 7. The other part of that is to think about perhaps before that meeting of those broadband people once a month, you all might decide to just have a little short meeting, kind of bread and butter type of stuff before that meeting, and maybe for an hour or half hour, and take care of some of those things in the middle of the month and things that may come up as due now in this day and time that you might need to have a quick action on. You could make it all a recessed meeting for the following, the whatever Monday comes up, or you could just announce that you're going to have a meeting in addition. But that's my thoughts on that. Be a little bit easier on the staff. Those of us that hang out and can barely make it to a meal, unless somebody would like to open their restaurant on Mondays. We would appreciate it if they would. And another thought along in a different manner is this evening you'll be talking about the possibility of bonuses for the sheriffs. It's too bad that the Commonwealth of Virginia isn't giving them all a bonus, but I think they all deserve it. We all know in government there's more and more what we might call unfunded mandates, things that everybody has to do. And the Sheriff's Department has many a surprise in its life of things they have to do, including for me, about this time last year, something to do with wildlife wrestling. And last but not least, everybody go vote tomorrow if you haven't already done so. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the courtroom?
Good afternoon, David Connick from Stonewall Hawthorne District. I notice on your agenda you have an appointment to the library board coming up, and I also understand that there's a proposal for a substantial renovation or expansion of the public library in the county that would cost, according to some document I've seen, between $5 and $6 million. And I just want to say that I hope the board will put out a request for, or at least allow people to apply for that position. I understand there's an opening coming up, and I'm aware of a number of people in Stonewall Hawthorne District that are interested in applying for that position. So I hope that the board will keep that in mind and take that into consideration, because I think it's a very critical time for the library board in light of this proposal that's floating around. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I see we do have a few people on Zoom. Anyone wishing to speak, please raise your Zoom hand and we'll unmute you or ask you to unmute. Not seeing any hands raised. Last call. All right, closing public comment and moving into the consent agenda. Thank you, gentlemen.
Madam Chair, I'll put forward a motion that we adopt the consent agenda.
Second that motion, I did have a question, but it's a quick question, I think.
Okay.
There seems to be a lot of activity on Amazon. It seems like that's the new, what was it, all the credit card bills used to come over under the same description. And I was just wondering, do we know why there's so much use or so much purchasing from Amazon? Is it?
In the past, if there were purchases on Amazon, they would have been charged to a credit card.
Yep.
And now we have an Amazon account to ensure that those who are using that are getting the tax exempt status. Those invoices, et cetera, could be shared with board members if they're interested, just like the credit card invoices are.
I think I would like that if it's not too much trouble. I mean, I think we've all encountered questions where it was marked credit card services, and we wondered what all was involved in there. And I would, since there's so very many things that could come under Amazon card purchases, I would like to know.
It's not quite as clean as the others, but we can find a way to package it. As far as having one concise document.
That would be helpful.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Moving into appointments. Rappahannock Community Services Board.
I'd like to see the board advertise that opening to see what type of interest we may receive on that.
So there's one seat that's expiring the last day of this year. Could advertisement occur so we could
Yes.
get applications by our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I appreciate that.
Any further discussion?
Is that general consensus of the board?
I think that's the way it sounded, yep. Library Board of Trustees.
This appointment is a little bit different than the CSB in that it is one of the bodies that is listed in your policy 810 that I would automatically advertise unless that requirement is waived by the board. In this case, I've suggested that the board appoint Ms. Fortuna, who's the current president and who I think is being very even-handed with this whole process of trying to analyze what might be needed and how to get there and where it should be, et cetera. But I'll leave that for the board. Her application information is attached. Also, end of the calendar year date.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we reappoint Victoria Fortuna to the library board. I think it's important that we, in this critical stage, maintain continuity on that board in the
And I
leadership.
heard from several constituents about this reappointment, and I would second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I was just wondering, for the sake of discussion, when we have appointments next available, so that is a body that's term limited, isn't it, if I'm correct?
It is not term limited,
It's
no,
not.
but there are 9 members. Of course, the county's representative is myself, so there are 8 citizen representatives. I can share that information in bulk with the board if you'd like. The policy and my goal, of course, to meet that policy is to make sure the board is aware of these at least 2 months before, which is where we are right now. And typically with a December 31 expiration, you would want to make that appointment no later than that January meeting to make sure you have somebody seated for the next meeting of the body. This is the only 2021. They're all December 31st, and so the next, I believe there are 2 up in December 2022.
Any further discussion?
Just seems like there's a lot going on with the feasibility study, and I attended those meetings, was really impressed with the level of organization, and Ms. Fortuna was kind enough at our last meeting to give us an update, which I know she's promised us to do, and I think for continuity's sake during this critical period, it makes good sense to have her continue her good work on our citizens' behalf, and I heard from many citizens over the last week or so, encouraging us to reappoint Ms. Fortuna. So I support her reappointment.
All right. All those in favor of Ms. Fortuna,
And to be clear, this is a 4-year appointment.
4-year appointment.
Per the ordinance.
Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Appointment to Board of Building Appeals.
You've had one longstanding vacancy on this body, and we continue to look for a member. You have 2 more vacancies expiring at the end of this calendar year. We've not yet received word back from Mr. Anderson, but we have received word back from Mr. Monroe, and he's submitted an application for reappointment. And I would ask the board to make that reappointment, recognizing that this body really doesn't meet very often, if ever.
I'll put forward a motion to reappoint Jay Monroe to this Board of Building Appeals.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
As the board can see on this agenda item, I did lay out the different terms, and I can try to do that in the future for the other bodies, so to give you a fuller picture.
That's great. Appointment to the Ag and Forestal District. None.
You have one vacancy that is caused by Ms. Pierce's appointment to the BZA. She resigned because of the Code of Virginia section that you all know very well regarding members of the BZA. So if you have anybody in the field that is either a landowner or a landowner involved in agroforestal production, please ask them to submit an application for this vacancy.
Since you're advertising for another vacancy, for another position, does it make sense to advertise for this at the same time?
We can. It's not a very heavily used body, and I've found that word of mouth has worked better in the past. But if the board would like to place an advertisement for this, I'd be more than happy to do it.
It pays the same, isn't it?
Yeah. I didn't get a,
Correction on that one. Do we want to pay for an ad or just try to get,
it'll probably be $400 before it's all said and done, if we do it for 2 weeks.
400 for the one appointment?
For
an ad.
for 2 ads, probably.
Yep.
I don't think I'd want to combine the ads.
No.
Because I think that would be confusing.
I'd be fine trying to find someone personally. I don't know how the rest of you feel.
It literally is any landowner.
Yeah, I think I found the last appointee before David Thornhill. I could also try, maybe save a few pennies.
Typically, this body will meet once or twice a year.
Yeah, it's been active.
In most
kind of
years.
active
Some years it
recently.
won't wait at all.
Yeah.
Do we have anybody, I mean, I'm the board's appointee, but do we have anybody from Jackson District? I'm drawing a blank on that, I don't
I
think so.
can't recall right now.
Mr. Lilly is probably in your
Yeah.
district.
Lily.
Is he on it currently?
Wasn't that?
I think so.
I think that's who I got on last year.
Yeah, I don't think he was at the last meeting. Maybe he was. It's hard to tell, everybody was wearing masks.
All right, I think we're going
Well,
to try.
perhaps you'd try for a month, and then
Yeah.
I don't think there'll be another meeting coming up for several months, so.
We have time.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, old business, refuse and recycling.
The board has been interested in completing this project of demolishing the old pits and repurposing them at Amosville for some time. I did finally get the bid package out and received 2 bids. The bid tabulation is attached to board docs, and you can see here a bid of $42,000 and a bid of $44,000. This also includes a little bit of site work at Amosville to widen the drive path to the extent we can. We are pinched there by the REC transformer. It's my recommendation for the board to make the award to Demolition Services, Inc. of Culpeper. For your information, Weaver Works is the company that did the Amosville work to begin with. But I did say that I would recommend an award to them, but the board might want to during the supplemental appropriation, sorry, stumbling, you appropriated $45,000 knowing that there could be change orders during the project. In this case, you could make the award for 42,048, and just with, I want to be clear that with a larger budget, should something happen, that I would have the leeway to make those contract changes.
Okay. Thanks for getting that done. I'll go ahead and put forward a motion that we award the Amosville and Flatwood Refuse and Recycling Center pit demolition and site work project to Demolition Services, Inc., pursuant to their bid in response to IFB number 21-10GC in the amount of $42,048.
If you would amend that to include for an amount not to exceed $45,000 in case there are any change orders, I would be glad to second that.
Okay, so amended.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Ms. Smith with the amendment. Any further discussion?
I'm just glad to get this done.
Yep. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
This next item is regarding the courthouse historic window restoration purchasing award. This is the sashes. As you've all seen, the paint on the rest of the white portions of the building has recently been attended to. Released a bid for the sash refurbishment, which would involve removing all the sashes, taking them to a factory, and basically taking them all apart, putting them back together, repainting, replacing parts that need to be replaced. Unfortunately, as time was drawing close on Friday, the bid due date, I had not received bids. I extended the bids for a couple weeks, and so that's where we are right now. I have talked to one bidder, and they apologized profusely, and I expect I'll receive something within the next few days, hopefully. So then I don't think that this necessarily is something that is a huge hurry, but if and when that bid comes in on that bid due date, I'll let the board know, and if you want to move it along faster, you could call a meeting to award the bid, otherwise it'll be in the December meeting.
Thank you. Proposed purchasing ordinance amendment.
I shared some draft suggested changes, staff changes to the purchasing ordinance with the board at your last meeting pretty quickly, and suggested that they be referred to the Rules Committee. They were. The Rules Committee met and reviewed those changes and recommended be passed back to the board. I don't want to put any words in the Rules Committee's mouths. Recommendation now, if the ordinance meets the collective board's approval to move forward to a public hearing. There's a draft public hearing notice, as well as the ordinance in amendment in ordinance form attached. Happy to answer any questions. I mentioned the Rules Committee members would as well.
Well, I guess maybe I could chime in a little bit here as a member of the Rules Committee, but while we hate to see the dollar figures increased in almost any category, we're in a new world now, and it's just very cumbersome, I think, upon the county administrator, some of the old purchasing ordinance that he has to work with, and I don't know, I don't know if we want to advertise this now, if the board just wants to take a look at it and advertise it next month, but that's what I recommend, is that the board review this and have some input, unless you already are familiar enough with the
If you want to
changes.
make a motion, I'd support advertising it.
Yeah, I will. I'll put that in the form of a motion. That we advertise where is it at here? The advertised notice that's here.
Yes, so you'll advertise the ordinance amendment to Chapter 43
purchase.
as presented.
Yes.
And I'll just say, when you gather citizen input at your December meeting, depending on the feedback, you might move forward with adoption at that time, or you could hold adoption off, or you could choose to make changes and advertise again.
Let's do it.
We have a motion by Mr. Frazier, a second by Mr. Whitson. Is that correct, Mr. Whitson?
Correct.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Holly Springs Road turn lane.
This is an item that I brought to the board a few meetings ago. We discussed there is right now a taper on Route 211 eastbound. It's onto Holly Springs Road. This is directly across from Weaver Road that leads to Amosville Refuse and Recycling Center. And that taper really should be a full turn lane, deceleration turn lane. After interfacing with VDOT leading up to that prior meeting, I was told, well, all we need to do is adopt a resolution saying that the board wanted to use these SSYP dollars, past engineering dollars for this purpose, and they can move forward. Well, you did that, sent that to VDOT, and then they came back and said, well, actually, you need to hold a public hearing to amend the six-year secondary plan. So you have a couple options available to you. We could advertise an amendment to that plan and do that at the quickest pace we can. The public hearing could take place in December, or you could wait and just add it to the plan in May. So I don't know what the board would want to do. Adding this project to the plan would not take any other projects off. It wouldn't slow any other projects down because it's a slightly different bucket of money in those secondary road funds.
I would be in favor of going ahead and advertising for a public hearing now, because if 6 months would help the situation. It was, I guess, coincidental, but this was something I rode around with one of our former resident engineers from Warrington several years ago when we had a complaint about it, and they were going to work on it, but they were going to do that work in conjunction with REC when they built that new line through there. Well, there was no communication, I guess, between any of us, and myself involved. I should have tried to stay on top of that, but I didn't. REC upgraded their work. There was no road work. And we got a complaint, and I think Mr. Curry's very familiar with the coincidence of that. It was like a week or two after we had a complaint, there was a pretty bad accident there.
I remember that accident, yeah.
So I think that, 5 or 6 months may be beneficial if we can just, go ahead and schedule a public hearing next month.
Got a motion?
That is a motion.
I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Agreed. Let's go. Authorize the county administrator to vote time on broadband initiatives.
This is the agenda item that was on your October 4th meeting agenda. It was added as an addendum item at that time. It failed, not being unanimous. It's back on your agenda item as requested by the Broadband Authority.
Madam Chair, I put that in the form of a motion for board action.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Water Resources Protection and Monitoring.
This is the standing agenda item the board asked to have. I'm not sure if you really want it every meeting, but
It's okay.
if something pops up, you can let me know to add it or just leave it on.
One thing that's in here, one word, that I'll just latch onto, that's water. Mr. Parrish and I attended, gosh, it was an awfully rainy day, coincidentally, the Rappahannock River Basin Commission meeting down at Grays Mountain Lodge. There's a lot of talk about an upstream, and I know this is a bit far afield from this agenda item, but it's still related, upstream stream gauges that I think are critically important, not only for us in flash flood events, but also downstream to other localities to know what's coming their way. And I've talked preliminarily with Mr. Polster, so it's something I think that we need to work on. And right now, I think we've talked about this before. There's basically one stream gauge in Battle Run.
There is, and this project has been alive since before I've been here.
Yeah.
And it's led by the Rappahannock River Basin Commission, and which is a state group. And I know the Upper Rappahannock and 2 or 3 other river locations in the county are targeted.
Yeah.
And we answered a survey a number of years back
Correct.
on where and who owns the property and whether it be the VDOT right away or not. And I still had a lot of questions at that time of who would own the gauge, who would pay for the power, who would pay for the data upload. And
Yep.
there just wasn't a lot of clarity at that time. But I think it will come back together after we clear through some of the COVID fog.
Yeah, I think it's something that we should make a priority, because I know even this last rain event we had, Harris Hollow Road was flooded out where those darn beavers have made
Thankfully,
a home.
yeah.
Yeah. But I think it would serve our community well to be able to monitor water levels on a real-time basis. And then if in combination, we can contribute to the safety of downstream localities vis-a-vis our being the headwaters, I think it'd be great. So I'll keep everyone updated as this continues in the discussion at the River Basin Commission, and hopefully working with Mr. Polster, we can pull something off and get a few more gauges in the county.
And it might be that somehow there's a nexus with the broadband initiatives that happen
Great
to
idea.
provide backhaul. Because ultimately, the data has to leave the site to be useful to anybody.
Do you want to add that to your committee report and take it off of this old business, or just leave it on old business?
It's up to the board.
Well, I think there were several things that were that we were hoping would fall in line with this, and one of them was the stream gauges, and the other one was determining as a locality what our options were for tracking wells throughout the county, so that we could, have sort of a grasp on what our water resource situation actually is.
Yeah, regarding the wells, I did ask that question. The response I reported back to the board was that the state could not find anywhere that mandating well drillers to provide their data into the state database was enabled or prohibited. And they said, ask your county attorney. So that's where that is. I'm not sure if the board would want to ask the county attorney to do that research or to develop an ordinance that would mandate this to happen. Once you do that, we need to think about what are the consequences if people don't? What is the leverage that the county would use to ensure that it happens? Or is it a compassionate type system where we say you have to do it, but if you don't do it, we just don't bother you? There are a lot of potential issues with mandates.
Is it a mandate that we would have no enforcement arm because the permits are issued by the health department for well drillers?
In the groundwater management areas east of 95, there are different ordinance, state laws that apply, and there are mandates in that area by the state. They won't give you a permit. But here, we don't have that leverage.
So I'm thinking it would be some sort of ordinance that we couldn't enforce. What good is it?
Now, we could try to open up a system where we encourage people to report information in some way, and that could be helpful too.
Yeah, I think a lot of the well drillers would voluntarily give that information. I know Larry LaHue used to have it all by memory. He can tell you just about all. He's gone now, but at any rate, it wouldn't hurt if when they came in to apply for when the landowner came in to apply for a permit to dig a well, that we hand them the piece of paper that says, please report the results.
Now, the well construction logs for their permit with the health department, they're all available. They're just not stored in the state database. But we could interface with the health department and get all these, and somebody could do a big research project to try to compare them all and where the water level was at a certain period of time.
Yeah, I think in Madison County, even as far back as 20 years ago, you had to have a driveway entrance permit, or at least I believe maybe an entrance, and a drilled well before you could apply for a building permit in the county. That's not current?
They got rid of that a few months ago as far as having the well before the house was built.
Really? Well, that would have, something like that would have given us a leg up on that. We would have been able to require that, and therefore maybe had that information.
But you could work with the building office, and the building office not issue the OP for new construction of houses until you got that. The drillers do a form called a GW2 that has the depth of the well, how much grouting was done, all that kind of stuff. Water zones, water things like that. So that's already given to the health department.
Maybe a good
We just
project
need
for an
some-
intern.
We just need somebody to analyze that information, and we could possibly ask for volunteers for that. We should know if we're losing groundwater, if we're losing level of groundwater or not. Maybe we're not, but we should know.
All right. Will you just look into that for us, and we'll
Yep.
talk about it next month?
Maybe Chuck will volunteer since he's so versed on it.
He's got so much spare time.
All right, moving into new business, national opioid settlement approvals.
County attorney and I participated in an online meeting put up by the VACO and staffed by the Virginia Attorney General's office regarding the national opioid settlement process. And right now there is a settlement in place with at least one of the drug makers, and if the county wants to participate in that settlement process, the board would have to agree to a memorandum of understanding, which is attached to this agenda item. And the state is asking for the board to do that by way of adopting a resolution. Similarly, to formally engage in the settlements, and there'd be a settlement agreement as they come along, the board would have to pass a resolution authorizing a county staff person to actually sign that settlement agreement, and that such resolution is available. I would suggest that it's very unlikely with the staff and the county attorney's office and the county administrator's office that we'll be taking a suit to the pharmaceutical companies ourselves, and it makes a lot of sense for us to join in with the overall process. The way it was explained to us, and there's a very detailed presentation attached to this agenda item, is that the amount of money that Virginia will receive out of this national settlement is directly related to the number of localities that join the settlement, and they're working towards getting 100% participation. I think they noted one other state right now was at 100% participation. All that said, if the board has any questions, Mr. Goff or I could try to answer them, or we can pull up the documents available on this agenda item.
I'll put forward a motion that, should we move separately on each resolution?
Yes, please.
Okay, I put forward a motion that we adopt a resolution authorizing Rappahannock County staff to execute the Virginia Opioid Abatement Fund Settlement Allocation Memorandum of Understanding.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second.
And because
Any
it's a
discussion?
resolution, it will be roll call.
All right, roll call vote. Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Mr. Parrish?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Whitson?
Right.
And I also.
I'll put forward a motion that we adopt the proposed resolution approving of the county's participation in the proposed settlement of opioid-related claims against McKesson, Cardinal Health, Amerisource Bergen, Janssen, and their related corporate entities.
I'll second that one.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just would say, this is sort of a different sort of agenda item for us. I don't think something like this has come our way before, that I can recall. But you all have both spent clearly time working on this, and so you think it will yield fruit, and it's a worthwhile thing for us to continue to do.
Yeah, there was a law firm that came around, when was that?
A couple of years ago.
That's been probably 4 years ago, shopping us, and I didn't like what I was hearing, and I didn't like what I was seeing, so I kind of steered the board away from that. But this one, since it's kind of it's a statewide thing, the OAG is really handling the litigation, and we just stand to gain potentially some money to help with our end of it, which is, as you saw in the charts, it's only like 1.97% of the total. But we're a small jurisdiction, 7,300 people, whereas, Prince William and Chesapeake and whatnot don't get the lion's share, but I still think it's worth doing. I think Mr. Perry, I won't speak for him, but we both agree that we should participate, as far as I know.
Yeah, it is, if you look at the MOU, and it's very detailed, and as Mr. Goff just pointed out, the exhibit to that includes the percentage of how much Rappahannock County will receive of a certain percentage of the overall. It's very, very complex. And there will be some restrictions to some of the funding that comes off to be related to opioid, and there will be no restrictions on other parts of the funding. But you're right, this is very atypical. Something like this would come before the board.
Thank you. I was hoping for a little more background, and I appreciate it.
Good question.
All right, this is a roll call vote as well. Mr. Whitson?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Mr. Parrish?
Aye.
And I also. Annual
So,
budget.
wait a minute. Mr. Curry and I serve on the child.
CPMT.
Yeah. Another acronym, but it involves taking care of kids that are under 18, and there's usually no more than 30 kids, but it costs about $1 million, and our share is roughly $500,000. And that's a lot of money, and most of the problem, a lot of the problem is that both parents are, hooked on drugs, or they have problems like that. So if we get whatever money we get from this, if we get any money from this settlement, I would suggest that we funnel it right to the school and ask them to have a program of education, prevention, starting in first grade, going all the way through to high school, so that by the time these kids get to the age of experimentation and peer pressure, that they'll know better. And in the end, it could save the county a bundle of money just by having more responsible parents, because it's a real trap that kids fall into, because they don't know what the consequences are, because they haven't been educated in that respect. So I'm not going to be here, but my suggestion, when that money comes in, if we funnel it to the school and ask them to set up a program like that.
Well said.
I think
It reminds me a lot of the Golden Triangle program that I would hear a lot about in North Carolina, which was a lot of the tobacco settlement money would go to different kinds of projects, and certainly some of it was constrained to certain uses. And this sounds like it'll be similar, but then some of it, I know down there in the Asheville area, they used it to build something probably like we kind of started talking around doing at the old Aileen site, or it seems like maybe some agriculture-related programs, local agricultural programs might be able to benefit from the monies that aren't so constrained.
And I can tell you, I don't have an idea of the dollar value that we're talking about.
I mean, but I think on principle, it's an important thing to do too.
1.9%.
0 point, whatever, it's a small percentage of a percentage of, it's a small percentage of 15% of the very, very big number.
Like $560 billion.
Yeah, it's
Might be a little bit.
It might be a good way to initiate a program like that, even if it doesn't cover.
right.
much of it, yeah.
That's right.
We'll call you in when we vote on it.
Okay.
Well, there's a microphone right there for you.
Over there, on that side of the wheel.
Please speak up, Mr. Purse, that's what we'll say to you.
Yeah.
There's a handle on the microphone.
Amendment budget public hearing.
Yes, as the board is aware, Code of Virginia, Section 15.2.2507 requires you to hold a public hearing if your supplemental appropriations exceed 1% of the adopted budget. Normally, we come to that point about November, December, and we are there, and there are several large supplemental appropriations that will be coming forward, including a true-up from the schools to account for their different revenue sources, including their ARPA dollars. Your previous supplemental appropriations, and then the first tranche of ARPA dollars that the county receives until they're actually in the budget that can't be sent out, and the board at your last meeting selected a few uses for those funds. Also, at your last meeting, you discussed funding the fire companies, and those dollars will need to be appropriated as well. And I would say the jail HVAC item, which is the next item, is one that could be added. And anything else that comes up between now and when this will go to advertisement, any request for supplemental appropriation would be added to that public hearing notice.
How many public hearings are we looking at now for December?
Yeah, good question.
The purchasing ordinance and this.
Holly Spring Road?
Say again?
Holly Spring Road turn lane.
And Holly Spring Road, yeah.
We're up to 3.
I don't want to presuppose what happens, but those seem pretty not contentious.
Anything possibly coming from the planning commission?
So yeah, good question. 2 forestal district renewals and
That's tonight.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Then to the campsites on the farm winery? Next month, it's got to be advertised. Yeah. That's right, because you,
potentially 4.
It's for you already, so.
But that won't be ready for
No.
public hearing.
so on the ag districts, how was that? I noted the ad in the paper, so it was simul advertised?
We advertised for the, all 3 bodies in one ad.
Okay, yeah, I was surprised by that. I didn't,
And you can do that particularly with planning commission and board.
okay.
But we threw in the Ag and Forestal District Advisory Committee as well, and that is not a zoning ordinance item. So it just needs to be advertised twice in a row, and the 2 need to be not
Okay.
more than so much apart.
So to answer your question, there's a special exception permit for 2 primitive campsites on a farm winery. I wouldn't put that in the category of a big to-do.
Sounds reasonable.
We're looking at 4. If we can agree to cap it there, I think we might be safe.
There you go.
Do I have a motion?
I'll put it in the form of a motion,
I'll-
yes.
I'll second the recommended action to authorize county administration to advertise fiscal year 2022 budget amendment public hearing.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. HVAC replacement. I know I've heard about this for at least a year.
Yeah, this is an item that's been on the list, my list, for a very long time. It's been that way because it's not easy to solve. After working on it for a long time, and it being heat in the jail and cooling in other portions of the building, as you're aware, I believe it was the later stages of 2018, the boiler failed at the jail. We did submit an insurance claim and received insurance payment of about $10,000. But for a lot of reasons, it didn't make sense just to replace that boiler with a light boiler. One, the air conditioning in much of the space that was heated was not very good and was not set up well across the building with different zones. And 2, the hydronic loop and the radiators were not great, and the jail was no longer being used as a jail. So there were a lot of reasons why changes should be made. The sheriff has reminded me that this is a priority for those last couple years as we provided temporary cooling and heating. What we've done now is designed a VRF type system, mini split type system to provide cooling and heating, high efficiency cooling and heating in basically the entirety of the old jail, including the old part and the new part, as well as cooling for the server rooms who do not have cooling right now. I noted here that the bid's expected to be less than $75,000, and I'm not wanting to really be any more specific than that because I do want there to be competition here. But I want to make sure the board's aware of what kind of costs we're talking about. I did have a design for the entire building about a year ago, and it was $225,000. I said that just doesn't make sense for that building to do that project. So we went to work to scale it back. This should provide us heating and cooling for a long time and a good, efficient method if the board would like to move forward and have me place a bid out on the street. Or perhaps kick it to the building committee if you want to have the building committee look at it first.
I guess my only reaction when I saw this on the agenda, and having been, I should be careful how I phrase this, having been in the jail recently, for entirely benign volunteer-related reasons for the Fodder Stack 10K, where they store all the stuff every year. It occurs to me that we're investing in part, space that can't be used for anything that's productive.
About a quarter of the space is cells, which is really good for storage only. But if you want to store paper goods or anything like that, long-term storage, it really needs to be conditioned from a humidity standpoint. The other portions of the facility, the old kitchen and the day room, if you will, those are the only big areas that we have, but they're upstairs. But they could be put to better use if we had proper HVAC. And then
Okay.
on the first floor, you have occupied spaces for offices, servers, and deputy bay, which are not heated and cooled
Okay.
properly right now.
Okay.
That's
And
never
server
a good
rooms.
thing for a server room.
Server room
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah,
can't be
with-
too hot.
We use fans and whatever we have to right now.
Okay, for discussion, I'll put forward a motion that we authorize the county administrator release an invitation for bid to seek bids to replace the HVAC system serving the old jail to include office spaces and server rooms used for law enforcement purposes.
I'll go ahead and second that.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
This seems like some good low-hanging fruit
Yeah.
with the capital budget that we have in place.
This will take a partnership between local electrician and HVAC. The local electrician part will not, will be able to be handled with budget we already have on the operating side
Okay.
and be below the bidding thresholds, whether you change the ordinance or not by then.
Okay.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Addendum, what is this?
Budget
FY '23 budget.
Can't believe it.
I can't either.
As I noted, some of you may have heard just before the meeting, Ms. Newman from the school board clerk sent me an email first thing this morning saying that the school board was going to talk about the budget calendar at their November 9th meeting, and wanted me to look over it to see if it looked and fit with ours. And I thought, last year at November, we had a very preliminary discussion about schedule, and so I went ahead and drafted a preliminary schedule that follows what was done last year. And I apologize for how tight the font is on this table. It's the same format that you've looked at. I do want to point out one wrinkle here, and that is in a reassessment year, you must advertise an equalized tax rate if you are going to adopt a tax that brings in revenue that is more than 101% of what we would have brought in before the reassessment. And if you do that, that public hearing has to be noticed for 30 days as opposed to the normal 7 days. And that has its own special code section, which I referenced in the narrative 58-1-3321. I'm not suggesting that there will need to be a tax increase, and if the board moves forward with an equalized rate that doesn't bring in more than 101% revenue, you wouldn't have to have this 30-day lead on it. And I can understand it'd be very confusing for citizens to understand whether the taxes are going up on whole or not. If the assessment goes up and the rate drops from what it is today down to 60 or something like that, but it could still be a tax increase if they don't understand how all the math works, and that's why this code section's in place. It's a long way of saying that I've added some of that information to the schedule towards the end with the double caret noted, so that there may need to be a longer lead time on that hearing, and the hearing can't occur at the same time as your budget public hearing, same date and place. So you would have to do that a couple different times, and that would push your adoption and tax rate public hearing probably off till May 9th, which is still pretty good for past years, but not as quick as y'all did it this year. If you could review this information, let me know your thoughts on changes you think should be appropriate. I think it would be appropriate for the board to adopt a schedule at the December meeting because there are a lot of dates that will start to tick off as we get to the end of December and beginning of January.
Just to be clear, this means 1% above the existing
It's
rate?
a little,
Because 100% is double,
no, 100% is the same.
It's equal.
Is the same,
Yeah, so
okay.
200% would be
All right,
double.
well, yeah, 100% increase would be double, so it doesn't say.
If you really want to confuse yourself, just read the code. So when any annual assessment, biannual assessment, or general real assessment of real property by a county, city, town would result in an increase of 1% more in total real
Yeah.
property tax levied, such a county, city, or town shall reduce its rate of levy for the forthcoming tax year so that it causes the rate of levy to produce no more than 101% of the
Yep.
previous year.
Mm-hmm.
So the assessed values go up, you reduce your tax rate so that the amount you receive is about the same.
Yeah, 1%.
And if you do that, you're good. But if you don't do that, then you have to meet B, which means you have to have a public hearing with at least 30 days' notice. And you have to, that public hearing has to have 18-point font, and it has to have exactly these words. And so there's a process, and we just need to pay attention to that process as we go through to make sure that we're checking off all the requirements of 58.1, 33.21.
Thanks a lot for keeping all that straight for us.
Planning
Here,
ahead.
we only have to do it once every 6 years.
Yeah.
Some other localities, maybe every other year, some every year. Yeah. And I will note in this, I did include in my report, the real estate assessment notices should have been sent to the printer, and they should be landing in mailboxes sometime in the middle of November, with the assessor hearings in the second half of November, established dates on those notices.
What should we expect, Mr. Curry?
You should expect a fair and balanced assessment. And given that we do it every 6
Pitchfork-wielding
years,
mobs.
it's very likely that the values will increase over the last 6 years. And it's important for people to understand the context, that if your assessment goes up 20%, it doesn't mean your tax burden goes up 20% because of this equalized tax rate that we just talked about.
But
It could
6
have
years,
other consequences.
6
I'm
years
sorry.
is the maximum we can go.
That is
If
correct.
the value of real estate goes up a certain percentage, then even if it's after 2 years, then we have to have a reassessment.
That I'm not aware of.
That's the way it was.
Yeah, I'd have to look at those code
Unless they
sections.
changed it, that's the way it was.
That would be tricky, because how would you know what the values were if you didn't do the assessment?
I don't know. but that was
Sounds like a
part of
chicken
the
and
deal.
egg issue,
Yeah,
but there are pros and cons to
because
waiting.
we have done it like every 4 years, but the 6 years is the absolute max you can go.
Because there's a cost to this, which is real, and the board has budgeted for it over the last 2
Yeah,
years.
we've always done 6 years, except one time we did it 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're going to have to pay, say, $150,000, you might want to do that only every 6
Right.
years.
Yeah.
And you're suffering from a precision on the balance of spreading the burden to different property owners.
Well, I would say we've done it 4 years a couple of times, because I've been on it for 5 separate times, and I haven't been around that long. Well, I think we were, yeah, I think it's only this last time it was 6 years. Anyway, doesn't matter. We've got it.
All right.
Well, after we clear this one, the board can consider whether you want to change it to something other than 6 years, but we'll get this behind us first.
Good.
Should
Thank you.
we maybe consider inviting the Commissioner of Revenue to the December meeting? Because I think the other thing we need to keep in mind is vehicle values and those bills going up for people too.
Yes, that is an issue, and I can invite the Commissioner of Revenue as well as the assessor if you'd like. I'm sure at the December meeting, you'll have probably heard from citizens about their assessment, concerned about what it means or doesn't mean, and the
Probably a good
assessor.
idea.
I think we
Really good
ought to
idea.
be really proactive on this.
Yep, good one.
All right. Board committee reports. Building committee.
Building committee. Building committee met. We had a full slate of committee members on board, and we discussed with Mr. Randy Vaughn the Milner report and the roofs as well. And we've got some questions that the building committee is working on. I think Mr. Vaughn's going to get back on that. He's also working on the space assessment needs with a new facility. So we had a pretty ongoing and in-depth discussion. I think the bottom line is we've got one roof that is considered at the end of its life, and that's the old jail over here. And it was a unanimous recommendation of the building committee that we proceed with issuing an RFP for replacement of that roof. Again, I guess to use a term that Ms. Smith just used, it's a low-hanging fruit. We know it's got to be repaired. Several people, including Mr. Curry, are eyewitnesses of the fact that in heavy wind, it waves at you, kind of like a rolling sea type of thing. So it could come off of there and create an emergency situation.
I maybe should have had that on this agenda. I might have missed that.
Yeah, well, we could make that a addendum if you want.
I can I could work with RCS to put together the specs and put a bid out for that, if the board wants.
That was our recommendation, that we move forward on that.
I don't think, technically, I don't think the board has to authorize that. You will have to authorize awarding a bid at the end of the day, and I would never want to put a bid out that the board isn't prepared to potentially award.
So by consensus, you could at least get the ball rolling.
It's a healthy price tag, but it's needed.
And it's, one of the challenges with these projects is that sometimes you're looking at doing something, but it ties into other projects. And so it's a question of when you stage that particular part of the project. This is a standalone item, so it can be completed without worrying that there will be a conflict with another process later.
That statement handles this roof. This roof needs to be replaced too, but if we're going to be doing any other major repair or renovation, we may want to have them in sync.
Okay.
So that's why this one should probably be held off on a little bit.
And I did receive a few years ago budgetary cost numbers from a local roofer on most of these roofs, and so I can't recall what the number is in your capital document it was, at least last year. So I know that we have local contractors who are interested in doing these projects.
And if they're done one at a time or two at a time, depending on the size of them, we can get them done with local contractors.
Okay.
So that's pretty much it. We had a pretty good discussion, and there's still quite a bit to discuss on that Milner report on the brick and the moisture. And bottom line, this is like the second or third time that the Board of Supervisors, in whatever makeup it's been, has been informed that we need to remove the plantings from around the buildings, and that the sidewalk out there needs to be replaced because it's either helping retain water or sloping the wrong way and running water back to the buildings. So we need to visualize a courthouse without that sidewalk and without those plantings.
Thanks for all your work.
Well, I didn't do much. Mr. Curry's probably, he has to put up with this.
Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Recreational Facilities Authority?
We had a great meeting at the library, and probably the top item was the dark skies discussion, which I hope everyone's heard. There's a proposal in place. Bonnie went back to the folks at the International Dark Skies Association, and they're willing to work with us in terms of the requirements that they would normally want in place. And they've reduced the requirements to maintain our designation as a dark skies park to 9 events a year, and they would all be supervised events. So it would discontinue the unsupervised use of the park at night, which I think everyone was happy with.
Yeah.
And really allows a good way for that program to move forward.
Good.
Very positive meeting.
Good.
Excellent.
And of course, there was a great fodder stack, kind of regroup after the fodder stack. And this will be, it is very different because there was we just had the fodder stack, and there will be a fodder stack again in April. So anybody that would like to volunteer for the fodder stack, they could use a little bit of extra help too.
Great event. Public Safety Committee.
I will mention real quickly that the output from the last Public Safety Committee meeting was for there to be a meeting with the Executive Committee of the Association, possibly some others, and the Public Safety Committee, because there started to be a number of people that it was a meeting anyway. That has not come together yet. Still working on that. Staff was trying to get more details on competing insurance costs. We can't do that. So we're just going to have to talk about it because we don't have access. VFIS will not quote anything, well, we don't have access to the broker record, and the broker record is not interested in doing it, so we're just going to have to talk it out.
So there's no other way to get access to the information?
The workers' comp we can get from Baycorp. That's the easy part, but all the other, the VFIS policies are priced, they're priced the way they're priced. They could be structured differently that we think would be a cost savings, but they won't run those.
Ms. Smith, anything on the Public Safety Committee?
No, we did not meet.
Rules Committee?
We met prior to the building committee meeting, and you all have seen the purchasing requirement that we recommended.
Good.
Thank you. Planning Commission update?
Yes, we had our regular meeting, October, what month is, yeah, October 15th, I think. And the big public hearing, or the most significant public hearing, was for a proposed dog training facility down on Forest Grove and Richmond Road, that area. And the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend denial of the application, given that it seemed all of the neighbors around the property where this would go were opposed to it for various reasons, traffic and otherwise. And it's my latest understanding that the applicant may withdraw the application before the BZA hears it. And we also tabled a tourist home application up in Chester Gap. The applicant wasn't there, and there were questions about the road and meeting the road standards that were clarified and fine-tuned in the May amendments. So that one is floating out there. And as mentioned earlier, when we were talking about public hearings, we'll have a public hearing at our next Board of Supervisors meeting. This is a special exception permit application for a farm winery over on Crest Hill Road. Young man who's really just trying to test to see whether primitive campsites might work as sort of an add-on to the farm winery. It seems like a fairly low-key, non-intensive type winery. And so that'll come to us, and there was very little discussion or concern from the Planning Commission. And then you all beat me to the punch, so we will hear the 2 Forestal District renewal public hearings tonight.
Mr. Whitson brings to mind this conversation about the road standard. The zoning ordinance references that tourist homes must, if they're off a private road, that private road must meet your type 2 road standards as identified in chapter 147 subdivision. And that road standard is flawed. And a constituent brought that to our attention. And if you look at this, the cross-section states that the crown needs to be 6 to 9 inches, and the traveled way can be as narrow as 12 feet. Well, a 6-inch crown on a 12-foot wide road is way too much, way too sloped to either side, and even passenger cars, if straddling that center, could be bottoming out, definitely at 9 inches. So there are some recommended changes to that I shared with Mr. Whitson that the Planning Commission can review and consider, but that would be an ordinance amendment because it is a reference item included in your ordinance. And that would have to move through the whole public hearing process in the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors.
So we're going to move with that as soon as possible?
Well, that's up to the Planning Commission. And if the board suggests that that's important, then I think this rarely ever came up in the past because subdivision roads don't come up very often in Rappahannock County. But as soon as this was tacked on to the tourist home, now you have a situation where it's more likely to come up.
Yeah.
When you don't have a home that has a single private driveway to a public road, or maybe direct, well, I think it's that situation. You have a private road that serves more than one person, then they're supposed to meet this. And to meet this, if it were a 24-foot wide road, then 6 inches might be okay.
Yeah.
But a 12-foot wide road, which is the minimum, it's a problem.
So I got a call from John Pennington, who's the owner of Monomoy Construction,
Mhm.
does a lot of work in the county. And he'd been called by the property owner to certify that the road was Category 2. is it?
Yeah, it's this type 2
Type
roads.
2, and he said the road was in perfect condition, that he had, it held up over the last, whenever since he built it, it held up fantastically. But it did not meet this criteria because this criteria is flawed. He said it would, if you had that kind of crown, you couldn't even drive your car down the road. So it's, I think we should go ahead and address it as soon as possible.
The federal government has a guideline that states that it should be approximately 1/2 inch per foot, that cross slope. And so adding a slope rate into this document would fix the problem as opposed to a crown height.
With
And then it
just
would-
that language, approximately 1.
Something like that.
Okay.
And there's nothing to say that that's right in every situation, because when you go around a corner, most of us recognize the road is called super elevated, right? It all slopes one way when you're going around a corner. Well, then technically you would still have to be crowned around a corner. So I think a little bit of tweaking on the language would allow us to have a proper road accepted, and it might rely on a little bit of judgment from staff, so that it's not so rigid. This is what the goal is, or but it could possibly be authorized by staff or a PE if the applicant gets somebody to put their seal on it.
Okay, we can tackle that right away.
We'll have to advertise because it's a change to the ordinance.
Yeah.
But we can work it out and vote to advertise it in December.
That is actually an attachment to your chapter 147. If you ever go online code, it's right at the beginning. And I imagine we'll start from scratch. Who knows where this document is?
Okay.
That's probably from Fauquier.
Possibly.
No, it's probably part of the 1984, which was a package from Fauquier. I'm not kidding.
And then they may have a 24-foot wide road, and 6 inches would have been okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Whitson. Fire Levy Board did not meet. We will meet, I think, in January or February. Anything in the reports?
Can we see the treasurer's reports? Just pull them up there.
Yeah, and I do want to point out a couple things. I told you last month you probably were at your lowest cash level back in August. I was wrong. And you are now at your lowest cash level without any doubt, because the deadline for real estate taxes is coming up. So 6.152 million. And so I started to try to envision, as we keep pushing back when the bills go in the mail for the taxes, I think what you're seeing, and I'd have to look a little bit more closely, is kind of a 2-hump revenue curve where people get their bills and they pay. And then it kind of trails off, and then the deadline comes and they pay. So it's kind of a irregular revenue flow into the county.
Okay.
Nonetheless, this is not artificially changed by federal pandemic influx of revenue, the shape of the curve. The height of the curve is, we know we have that extra $700,000.
Mm-hmm.
That was one thing I wanted to point out. The other is your meals and lodging, which is now all in for this quarter, and $119,000. This does reflect the increased tax rate for the lodging side of things. But you can see, even compared to 2020 pre-pandemic, the rate does not justify that change.
No.
It's even more. So you're seeing increased activity with a little bit of influence from that tax rate, which I think we thought was $40,000 overall.
Right.
And, well, maybe the 40,000 gets close to this, but
So-
no, it's 40,000 over a year, so it'd be only 10,000 part of that bar.
Right.
So are we looking at potentially, I'm just trying to extrapolate on an annualized basis, are we talking $500,000 now approaching 600 maybe for meals and lodging tax revenue. Am I ballparking correctly?
Well, I think fourth quarter is usually a fair amount lower,
Okay, yeah, that makes
so-
sense, right,
probably less than that. But
okay, but it's headed in the
Just
right
had
direction.
2 new restaurants open up, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it fluctuates. Well, it'll be very interesting to see if COVID ever does end, if there ever is a normal, to see if some of this changes back, if there's been influence by that has been driving more people here. I can tell you, the weather hasn't cooperated great for the park, but the park hasn't been anywhere near as busy as it was last year. So, interesting.
Yep.
And then hopefully you've looked at the sales tax, which still is just very strong. Higher than last year, continues to be, and we're going to get into those Christmas buying months, which are shown in kind of December,
Oh, yeah.
January, February.
yep.
Is when those actually move back 2 months when the dollars were spent, so.
Thank you, Amazon.
So where's the food and lodging tax on this?
You just showed, that was,
That's at the very bottom.
Oh, that one, oh, yeah, sure, okay.
That was added like a day after the others, that's why it's a bump. Nothing else really of criticality to show, the reports look fine.
yeah, I mean, I just want to compliment the treasurer and you for presenting all these reports in the standardized form, because it allows us to benchmark and make good budgeting decisions, and, I mean, very key tool as we go forward, so thank you.
That's all, treasurer does it all.
Thank you, Treasurer Nick.
Yes. There's nothing else in that section. We're on to matters presented by the board.
The only thing I can think of is that, what are we going to do with the, getting the Culpeper people out of using our Amosville dump?
I'm working on that in the background with the sticker program as discussed at the last meeting.
Okay. So what we envision is people will pull up, show their ID, they get a sticker for that particular car.
Correct.
And then if they come back in another car, in the pickup truck, then they get another sticker for that.
That's right.
Right. And if they're rolling from Culpeper, we tell them to go to their own landfill.
Well, we hope that they will see the signage in the months leading up to
Right,
that
yeah.
hard transition. During the transition time, they'll be asked for evidence of their residency. And if they say, well, I live right over there in Amosville, we've asked what road, then we let them know that after such and such a date, this facility will no longer be available to you.
Yeah, main thing is to get it all in place before all the houses are built there. Cravengers.
And they're going to town over there, aren't they?
Yep.
So ironically, back in the early 80s, that parcel was approved for 2,200 houses. And the lawyer in Texas never got it recorded within the 6 months. And so for the last 40 years, they've been coming back with a variety of applications, and they finally got, how many, 700 houses now?
I guess 700, but that may be phased.
And there's a mixed-use
Yeah.
component. There's some commercial there, right?
Yeah, that held them up for a while. I mean, they've got water and sewer, got a water tower. Dominion built the new substation there. Everything's ready, except they didn't have a commercial tenant that was interested. So I think it switched hands 2 or 3 times after that because they couldn't find a tenant. It just languished.
If you can't fill housing now, then there's something wrong with your business plan.
But you've got to get material.
And
That's-
labor.
That's true.
And labor,
Material and
yeah.
labor, yeah, that's true. If you can get the houses built.
Anything else?
I did have something, I know with the change in the superintendent up at the park, sometimes there's opportunities to revisit things we talked about before. And I know a couple of years ago, probably 2019, we reached out to the park about Hogback Mountain and their tower up there, and whether there was any opportunity for the county to tie into that. And I wondered if it made sense for us to reach back, now that there's been a bit of a change up there, and see if they would allow us any kind of use, whether it was,
I'm not sure who
At all.
owns the tower, if the park owns. I think Mr. Condenquist reached out back
I think
then.
he
That
did
was
too.
before I was engaged. I can ask Superintendent Kinney, who's engaged. I'm not sure. Depending on what other assets might be available for us here locally, whether that would still bring value. But it's worthwhile knowing.
We were looking at coverage. I think they did the coverage maps if we were on Hogback, and then the one over on in Madison. No, I don't think
Those
it
real
really-
tall ones.
I don't think it really improved anything. But
It's very far away, but
maybe the
it's
equipment
very
was
high.
changed.
well, if it's, I just wondered if it was a question worth asking. It sounds like if the propagation's not there, it may not be.
Yeah.
But
And I
for
don't
some
know.
folks, it is a surprisingly clear line of sight over there from some places in the county.
It's up there, that's for sure.
Good question.
So, are we ready to go into,
We don't have to do
We don't
that.
have it closed,
okay.
so we're ready to reconvene, recess until
Unless there's
7 o'clock unless there's anything else.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right? See everyone at 7.
That's
It's really nice.
fine.
Not only
Let
do
the
we have
dogs
time to
out.
eat, we have time to take a nap.
Before it started. Okay.
Okay.